Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. Today we are reading, reviewing, discussing The Wandering Inn by Pirate Arbor. This is the very beginning, or I guess kind of second episode of season 2 of the show, where we're going to do a chapter by chapter read along, where I will read the chapter and then I'll do a full spoiler discussion of the chapter afterwards, where we will go through kind of my favourite moments, things like that. This is a web novel or web serial that is available completely for free online. I have bought the ebook version and I've been reading that version simply because it's just a bit more easy on the eyes to me than reading off the old iPad. Well, this is a Samsung tablet, but you know what I mean. Let's get straight into things. So we are on Chapter 2.0, so I guess we aren't going into Chapter 1s, we're doing a 2.0. And this one is kind of what I was expecting to happen for a lot of Volume 1, and I think maybe it might have been more fun if it had happened during Volume 1, which was Ryoka and Erin, who are the two primary protagonists or point of view characters finally meeting. So Ryoka's like, she didn't mean to go into the inn, but she did. Okay. And then she doesn't seem like there's anyone there. And then she finds Erin in the kitchen. She's kind of Ryoka is kind of reeling from finding out that the Horns of Hammerad are dead. And she got to Liscor too late, so she wasn't able to like get involved in any of the stuff that was going on. But yeah, so the Horns are dead, and Ryoka's kind of reeling, not really sure what to do about it. She doesn't know how she feels, doesn't know whether she's sad or, you know. So, well, I think she does know she's sad, actually. That might be me putting emotions on her. So, she's going into, she goes into the inn, and she finally sees Erin asleep on the kitchen floor. And just as she's about to wake her up, just as Erin, so Ryoka slaps herself on the head. It doesn't really say why, and that wakes Erin up. And Erin wakes up and goes, "I'm up, knight to F3," which tells you that she dreams about chess. And Ryoka's like, "Oh, she's about my age." The difference between like Ryoka's inner monologue and the way that she speaks in dialogue is so weird. Like, we swap over now to Erin, and then Erin is kind of like talking about Ryoka, really. So she's in her inner monologue, she's talking about recognizing that Ryoka's human, that she's Asian, or that she looks Asian is what she keeps saying. She's like, "Oh, I could have said ni hao or konnichiwa or something like that," which obviously Ryoka would have known, but she says she was scared off by trying to talk Elvish to Chiria, which was quite funny. And then so Ryoka's like, "Oh, is this an inn? Are you an innkeeper?" And Erin's like, "Oh, here's your food, blah blah blah." And she talked about how she also has a new soup called Random Soup, where she just throws stuff in a pot and relies on her cooking skill to make it edible, which is quite funny. She then introduces herself, and Ryoka basically isn't talking. Like, Ryoka's just not really talking very much. She's kind of like grunting and basically saying nothing to Erin. Not sure why she doesn't. I mean, she's upset. I guess that might be it. So, yeah, so this is a really interesting chapter. Well, I'm going to put the tablet down and stop the recap for a sec. This is an interesting chapter because it's quite short. So we're used to now Wandering In chapters being like 8 to 10,000 words, and this is like 5. This is also kind of going back in time a little bit, because obviously I've not read the original volume 1, I read the rewrite. So we're going back in time a little bit in terms of Pirate Arbor's writing kind of experience and growth and skill. So this chapter, it's not like it's bad or anything. Neither this chapter or the previous chapter are bad, but this particular chapter is a little bit like, well, Eren and Ryoka have a short, mostly one-sided conversation. And so, yeah, Eren's like, oh, you know, what's going on with you? And then Ryoka's just kind of ignoring her because that's kind of her deal. And she eventually like farts out a couple of words. She says, oh, it's fine, thank you. And she's thinking a lot about the Horns of Hammerad. She then also talks about how her in-law monologue at least, talks about how she really likes the juice because it reminds her of like soft drinks from Earth, which all she's had is like booze in taverns in world, because, you know, medieval times most liquids were booze. Yeah, and then she's talking about she buys a pitcher and she gives her a gold coin to be like, this will pay for everything, which is fun. And then where are we? Yeah, Ryoka talks about how she feels guilty for not being there with the horns and not dying with them. Then she talks about how she has realised that more people from Earth are in world. At some point over this, yeah, here we go. She says that she reveals that she was Batman. This was spoiled by a commenter in the comments last week. I do see all the comments like pretty much straight away, guys, so I'm trying not to spoil. Yeah, this was spoiled in the comments last week. I don't particularly mind too much because it was literally revealed in the next chapter, but let's just keep a tight ship. Other people might also be reading along and they might not be ready to go on to the next chapter yet. So then they talk a little bit about the scrying spell with Kent Scott. Then what's up next? So yeah, then there's food. She's eating the food, and then like she's like, "Oh no, Eren's coming back," and she like sits at the table and tries to talk to her, because she's like, "Oh, I've not seen any humans, and not, you know, Asian women her age." There's also an interesting thing where earlier in the chapter, I did miss it, but Ryoka like describes Eren's physical appearance, and it's interesting because that is not what I expected Eren to look like. I don't know why, but I did not see her as like, I saw her as having like black hair, probably because of the like Solstice surname. Like if you had told me that Eren was Asian based on basically her name and nothing else, I'd have been like, yep, makes sense. Ryoka obviously has an Asian name. She then finally introduces herself, and she talks about how she's a runner, that she's a city runner, and Eren's talking about like, Eren's like, oh, I saw you make light. Do you know magic? She's like, oh no, I just know like a couple of bits. And she goes, oh, are you an adventurer or something? And she goes, no, I'm not an adventurer, but I knew some adventurers. And then her and Eren and Ryoka basically realise that they're talking about the same people, that they both knew the horns and they're both sad about it, about them dying. I do feel like I don't know whether I said this in the Death of the Horns episode, but I do feel like we are going to see those characters again. I feel like you don't explicitly see a couple of them die, and it kind of makes sense for those characters maybe to come back at a later date. Calrus, for example, is like a massive character in book 1, and he kind of dies off screen. You see his arm get ripped off, but I feel like he dies off screen. Anyway, so yeah, Ryoka and Eren kind of start to become friendly, and they start chatting about the horns and stuff. Eren asks some questions about running, and then Ryoka's like, well, I'll just tell her the whole thing. Like she wouldn't have normally, but then she tells her the whole thing. And then she talks about the leg shattering and the high passes, and fighting off Yvonne. And there's lots of interesting stuff that Ryoka has done. Lots of interesting things that Ryoka has done. And she kind of goes through and tells Eren all about it. Again, I think this is a fun conversation, and it's kind of a shame that it didn't happen earlier. I don't know. And then Ryoka's like, oh, I know I've got to go. She's got to get going. She says, oh, she's got to get north to Chelm. There's someone I have to talk to. I don't know who that might be. Maybe Garia? And then it's quite funny because Ryoka's like, okay, I got to leave now. And as she leaves, she pulls out her iPhone, which, she's now used repair to fix. And she pulls it out. As you notice, she's got enough battery for a few hours of running. And Eren's like, oh, hey, is that an iPhone? And Ryoka's like, mm-hmm. And then Eren just keeps going. He goes, oh, I'm not an iPhone person. I've got an Android. Well, my parents got it for me, blah, blah, blah. Like this long conversation. And then, Ryoka and Eren both realise they're like, you're from Earth. Like, that's how... And then it ends with, oh my god. I think that's a really funny way for... the realisation to hit Eren, late. But yeah, that was fun. Overall, this was a nice and short and very enjoyable chapter. I feel like I've kind of... In Volume 1, Ryoka was for most of Volume 1 at least, Ryoka was one of my characters I was most interested in, or favourite characters. But now I feel like that's kind of shifted to Eren, because I feel like all of Ryoka's supporting cast that were really good are dead. And Eren still has Klivich and Relk and Pisces and Tauren. So there's a lot of interesting things. And Pawn. So there's lots of interesting things going on with Eren. And I feel like the only interesting thing going on with Ryoka at the moment is the dragon and the necromancer. But she was compelled to go to Liscor in the rewrite volume, but now she's basically at Liscor but hasn't gone in and hasn't tried to find the necromancer, so I don't really know what's going on there. But overall, another good chapter. As always, well done, Pirate Arbor, for writing a fantastic fantasy story. Really looking forward to reading the next chapter. Might end up doing 2 chapters next week, just because I want to maybe get a head start. Or it may end up that I read 2 chapters but only put up 1 video because there's other videos that need those slots. It's the end of the month, so there might be some July wrap-up stuff going on next month. Anyway, I'm going to get back to reading a different fantasy book, and I will talk to you guys next week. Please make sure to like this video if you liked it, and comment. Drop a comment down below, chat with me about this week's episode, this week's chapter. And of course, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. The more subscribers I get from these Wandering In videos, the more of these Wandering In videos I will take time to make. So there you go. There'll always be 1 a week, but if loads of people subscribe and start commenting and we build a big community around it, that will probably inspire me to try and make more episodes a week. So that's a great way. Tell your friends, tell them to subscribe, tell them to comment. Thanks so much for watching, and I will speak to you tomorrow.